Hey everyone, I just want to make a really quick video talking about character in John Chu's The Water That Falls on You from Nowhere. And as I go through this, I'm going to think about some of the questions that are posted in the character module. Character is obviously one of the most important elements of writing fiction, and we've had plenty of opportunity to really practice getting into character writing in the journals and also understanding characters from short stories. So, The Water That Falls on You from Nowhere was actually the winner of the 2014 Hugo Award for Best Short Story. I got a little synopsis here. In the near future, water falls from the sky whenever someone lies, either a mist or a torrential flood, depending on how intense the lie is. This makes life difficult for Matt as he maneuvers the marriage question with his lover and how best to come out to his traditional Chinese parents. So, first question, how much of the conflict in the story rises from an opposition between the central character and his or her environment? And this is really the key to the whole thing. So, here, this two-column log, we've got character on the left, environment on the right. Characters, protagonist, Matt, Chinese-speaking American. He's a gay biotech engineer. Gus is his boyfriend and is a personal trainer. Matt's sister, Michelle, who is the primary antagonist. It's a little complicated. I'll get to that in a minute. But Michelle doesn't want him to come out to their parents. There are other characters. Most importantly, Matt and Michelle's parents, just known as mom and dad here. But there are other family members. Kevin is Michelle's husband. Their kids are there. In-laws are there, etc. The environment, and this is the kind of interesting feature of this story. I've seen this identified as speculative fiction, which I think is too broad of a term. Speculative fiction simply means genres that depart from reality. Could be anything. Horror, science fiction, um, historical fiction where a historical event goes another way than it went in reality and the world changes as a result. A better definition for the genre of this is magic realism, and that's where you have a realistic world with the addition of generally a single magical element, and that magical element is treated as normal, like it's just a feature of the world. And we can contrast this with Harry Potter, which is a fantasy series, and that idea of muggles. So muggles, right, in Harry Potter, normal people who don't have magic. Well, here with magic realism, there is no difference between normal people, magical people. There's just a thing that is in the world that is magical, but it's treated as totally normal. So you can't have one group who's normal and one group who's not in a scenario where the world itself does some magical thing, right? It affects everyone. It's treated as normal. So there's an interesting difference there. And then the actual magical element is that rain falls on you when you lie. So a few kind of illustrations of this environment from early in the story. The water that falls on you from nowhere when you lie is perfectly ordinary, but perfectly pure. True fact. Uttering this sentence is false or some other paradox leaves you with such a sense of angst, so filled with the sense of an impending doom that most people don't last 5 seconds before blurting something unequivocal. So what this means is when you say some paradox, and a paradox is like a contradiction, and it sounds kind of like a lie. It's meant to be a truth, but it sounds like a lie. And when people do that, they are filled with this anxiety about rain. They're about to get wet. So what they do instead is, if they have to say something like this, or if they say something like this, to alleviate that anxiety, they say something that is true really quickly, right? 5 seconds here. So for example, one sort of famous paradox is from Orwell's Animal Farm, and it's that all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others, which sounds like you might get rained on in this story. So what you would do to alleviate that is to then say apples are red, or something that it sounds more true, right? The sky is above us. Next quote. And this is Gus speaking. I love you, Matt. Gus's smile is radiant. He tackles me on the couch and smothers me in a kiss, and at first I kiss him back. Not only does no water fall on him, and I'll stop there, the point is Gus is telling the truth. So we get this magical realist element of the rain falling when people lie, allows us to really learn about characters. We see what the truth is in a way that we don't get often in a short story, especially a realist short story. Often in stories like that, a lot is made from not knowing the truth. And we often have characters who lie on purpose. And we have things like unreliable narrators who tell lies on purpose. And here we don't have any of that. And so we get to understand characters in a deeper way because of the rain that falls or doesn't fall. So the next line is Matt. I don't love you, not as much as you obviously love me. The water that falls on you from nowhere is freezing cold. I slip on the couch, but it just follows me. When it's this much water, it numbs you to the bone. So here Matt says, I don't love you as much as you love me, and he gets wet. So that's a lie. And we know too that depending on the intensity of the lie, it's more water or less water. This is a pretty intense lie. So when it's this much water, it numbs you to the bone, meaning big lie, right? He really does love Gus. And here in the last quote, Gus talking to Michelle, yes, I think you're a terrible cook too, in front of her husband and her parents-in-law, in our respective languages, in common, before she drags me back to the kitchen. Water doesn't fall when I say that. I have to take my pleasure where I can. So here you see Gus kind of getting back at Michelle a little bit because he thinks she's a bad cook. And guess what? He's telling the truth. Nice touch. So who is the protagonist? Who or what is the antagonist? What means has the author used to demonstrate their qualities? To what extent are the characters defined by contrast? And I've already identified that Matt is the protagonist. I mentioned this thing about Michelle as kind of the antagonist. Well, that's true. She is the antagonist when we compare her with Matt, which is why I have them contrasted at the bottom here. But there's also an element where Matt is really his own antagonist. Matt is afraid of change. Matt is afraid to tell the truth to his parents. And I think part of that is because both Michelle and Matt see their parents as being really traditional. Part of this is about their refusal to learn the language, right? We must assume there are other things given that they've grown up with these parents, but really this idea of the language, Matt says at one point, now that they're retired, they've just kind of given up on trying to learn English or use English. And the failure to change is a conservative trait. And I'm conservative lowercase, not like a political thing, but conservative lowercase, meaning refusing to change. So what happens when we think of things like that is, Matt and Michelle here have this tendency, and we all probably do, to think, well, if somebody is conservative in this way, they're refusing to change in this way. They're probably conservative in a bunch of different ways, right? And we can contrast this a little bit with Matt and his parents and Gus and his parents. Gus is out to his parents. Matt is still in the closet, as it were. So Matt hasn't brought this up to his parents. Michelle knows. Michelle doesn't necessarily seem to be homophobic, so we don't get the sense that the parents are necessarily homophobic, though it's sort of implied, right? Michelle doesn't say, I hate you because you're gay, or I wish you weren't gay. She just says, you're not going to come out to our parents, right? So there's some detail there that's important to understand these characters. Gus has a much healthier approach, right? Coming out is the healthier way to go. It's better for everyone's mental and physical health, just to be honest, right? So that's some of the ways in which the characters' interaction really reveal a lot about themselves and each other. So do we understand the characters as types or as individuals? By their actions, their speech, their thoughts. So how do we really understand the characters as types or individuals? And here the question kind of says it's probably helpful to pick a single instance of action. And so I've done that here, and I'll just read. This is kind of, 3/4 of the way through the story, but this conversation between Matt and Michelle. How dare you, she slams the door behind her, and I remind myself that I'm bigger than her now, and it'd be harder for her to beat me up. Are you trying to kill Mom and Dad? Well, that was easier than I'd expected. She knows, and I didn't even have to tell her. Also, I've broken my record. It usually takes an entire day before I make her angry. At this rate, I could be kicked out of the house and in a motel room by sunrise. I reserve one for every trip. She gets all offended if I don't stay with her at first. No, ideally, Mom and Dad accept it. That can happen. I want everyone to meet the man I'm going to marry. The future's not fixed, but right now Gus and I are headed toward marriage, so the air stays dry. She slaps me. My cheek stings. I'd slap her back, but I need to out myself to our parents before she throws me out of the house. Mom and Dad always let you get away with being selfish, don't they? I don't do whatever I want. She's blocking the door. Doesn't it matter to you that you're embarrassing Mom and Dad in front of mother-in-law and father-in-law? Phrasing things in the form of a question. That and weasel words work as insurance against the water that falls from nowhere. They just make it extremely obvious that you're hedging against the truth. Like I knew your husband's parents were even coming. Not that I'm embarrassing Mom and Dad. Well, not this time anyway. Your job, my full name in Chinese, including my family name, just in case it isn't clear she's furious, is to give our parents a grandson. We both already know this. She just enjoys showing me the dry air. I don't think I can do that by myself. I wish I hadn't said that. She slaps me again. My cheek hadn't stopped stinging from last time. Do you love Mom and Dad? Dump that slab of beef. Find a Chinese woman to marry. Put your penis in her vagina and make Mom and Dad a grandson. Make them happy. She turns to leave, but not 2 steps stomp by before she whips around. Coming out to Mom and Dad, she hasn't ordered me not to do it yet. And you're not coming out to Mom and Dad. With that command, she leaves. No water. She must mean it. She'll never leave me alone with Mom and Dad. I close my eyes and remind myself why I'm doing this. Right, Gus. He refuses to stop insisting it's okay if I don't come out to them. He'll understand if I don't. That just makes me want to do what he really wants, but won't say out loud. Coming out would have hurt less a decade ago, and it'll hurt less now than a decade from now, unless I just keep quiet and wait for my entire family to die off. Now there's a cheery thought. Great conversation. We really get a deep sense of who these characters are, just identifying a couple of things here, right? First, the use of Chinese, right, really adds to this story, I think. But there's a weird bit here. I want everyone to meet the man I'm going to marry. Right? So you get his motivation. And then you get the contrast with Michelle. You know, she says, you're selfish. I don't do whatever I want. Doesn't it matter to you? Blah, blah, blah. Right? Well, it clearly does matter to Matt. He's agonizing over this whole thing. And then she says, you know, what they really want is to give them a grandson. Your job is to give our parents a grandson. And that's not a lie, but it may not necessarily be the truth either, right? So then do these things, right? Dump the slab of beef. You are not coming out to Mom and Dad. And then this is interesting. You are not coming out to Mom and Dad. No water. Well, maybe she didn't really lie. You know, there's a way in which a command is not a lie. If I say, brush your teeth to children before bed, well, I'm not lying. If the children say, I did brush my teeth and they didn't, well, that would be a lie. So there's a weird difference between these things. And really, we get the revelation about all of these things within this story. This is her desire. You're not coming out to Mom and Dad. Is it true? Yes and no, right? It's not a statement that can be evaluated for truth or fact. So I hope that helps a little thinking about character and this story. It's a wonderful story, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope everyone is well. Bye-bye.